Hello and welcome to the latest programme brought to you from Deloitte. My name is Robert Bruce and I'm a financial journalist. In a few short years, the concept of integrated reporting has started to transform the corporate reporting landscape. Put very simply, integrated reporting enables companies and organisations to focus on long-term value creation. It allows everyone involved in corporate reporting to tell a fuller story by getting behind the figures and providing a proper understanding of a company's business model. It brings the intangibles, such as human and intellectual capital, on board. But it's not just a means of communicating what a company has done. In its turn, integrated reporting stimulates and creates the integrated thinking that will build insight and understanding and become a lead motivator for change within those companies. After 5 years of getting the message across and building momentum around the world, Paul Druckmann recently stood down as Chief Executive of the International Integrated Reporting Council. Now, Richard Howitt has picked up the baton to carry it forward into the future. He's well qualified to do so. Over his 20 years as a member of the European Parliament, he was the architect of the European Union's Non-Financial Information Directive. He's been an International Integrated Reporting Council ambassador for the last 5 years, using his position as an MEP to promote integrated reporting inside the policy and business communities. The International Integrated Reporting Framework has now been adopted by over 1,000 businesses around the world and has driven change in more than 25 countries. Richard Howitt now needs to keep the momentum going, raise the pace and spread the understanding still wider. Richard, what are your ambitions for integrated reporting and for the IIRC?
Well, firstly, can I just say it's an absolute honour to succeed Paul. It's an exciting moment for me personally. This is one of my first interviews since taking up the post of Chief Executive. As you say, I've had the pleasure and honour of being involved in IIRC and the whole concept of integrated reporting from the start, but there's now that huge responsibility on me to drive it forward. And my hopes are to move towards global adoption. Paul has taken it with all of our key supporters, because this isn't about any individual. He's taken it from a position of pioneering it to one where we've now got early leaders and early adopters. And my mission is to take integrated reporting forward to work towards the principle of global adoption, and that in 5 years' time we'll be talking not just about early adopters but an early majority.
Your first 100 days, you're going out to stakeholders across Europe, around the world. What are you going to be talking to them about and what are you hoping to hear back from them?
Well, one of my first messages is that there's no big lurch in terms of what IIRC is doing. I'm a new Chief Executive, certainly I'm bringing huge energy and enthusiasm and ideas to the task, but I'm absolutely signed up to the concept and there'll be big continuity. That's my message from me to them. But as a new Chief Executive, great opportunity to talk to people, to listen about their perceptions, about what are the strengths of integrated reporting, to talk with businesses and those who prepare reports themselves about why they found it advantageous. And not one single company anywhere in the world has decided to go down the road of integrated reporting and then gone back on that. They see the advantages. Learning from that is important from me, but also making sure that I get a really genuinely international perspective. In recent years, I've been representing Europe and European interests in the whole responsible business debate in the UN, in the OECD. But of course, the focus of my work in those last 20 years has been Europe. And I want to make sure that there's a very clear signal to all of our international partners across Asia, Australasia, the Americas, Africa, that IIRC continues and will be enhanced as a global coalition and a global movement, and therefore listening to their perceptions, learning from their experience, listening to what they want me to do and IIRC to do is a very important part of those initial conversations.
Of course, one of the things that's happening now is that we've had 5 years of establishing integrated reporting around the world and getting the idea across, building the momentum internationally as well as nationally. What we're facing now is a period of trying to embed that. Yeah. I mean, how do we do that? How do you do that?
Well, you did an exit interview with Paul, and you're doing an entry interview with me.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for this good management practice. But actually, you will get the same answer. And in the interview with him, you said that's a bit dull. It was exciting to do the startup, but maybe a bit dull to roll it out and to enhance it. Wrong. That's the one thing I'll disagree with you. I think it's extremely exciting to take this great idea, this great concept, of course the framework directly, a wonderful technical piece of work that has got such support amongst all of the stakeholders that help form it, but then actually to spread it, to grow it, to see it actually being applied in practice. For me, that's deeply exciting in the next period, and when I see just this month, for example, in the days, the 30 days since I've started, we've seen the Corporate Reporting Lab in Japan say that now over 300 companies there are producing integrated reports. We've seen in Malaysia 21 major companies in that economy announce that they're committed to doing integrated reports. And we've seen the launch of the King 4 new corporate governance code within South Africa, which explicitly embeds integrated reporting within it. Not a surprise, because Mervyn, our past chair, is the driver of that, but it sends a signal not just in South Africa, but to the whole world. Now that's in 1 month. This is something with deep international momentum behind it. And so these are going to be very exciting times in the months and years ahead.
And looking ahead, taking, as we should, the long-term view, where would you hope to be in 5 years' time?
Well, it is that concept of the early majority, and I do want to see many more companies signed up. I'm going to be part of reforming our business network. Our business network has undertaken a very important role in helping companies to learn from each other as they embark down the journey of integrated reports. But we've now found that we've got advanced reporters that want to collaborate and learn more, and then constantly, of course, we're recruiting new businesses to begin the IR journey, and so trying to differentiate that a bit, have a bit of a harder offer in terms of the new companies that we recruit in, but then specific focus group to enable the companies who want to take it on further. I think that's something that we can do very well in the next period. But as Paul told you, this isn't a numbers game. It's not about quantity, it is about quality. And it is about not simply more companies doing it, but it is about reforming whole systems. And the mission of IIRC is to say that we want integrated reporting to be a key principle of 21st century corporate governance. What makes good corporate governance is a huge international debate at the moment, and we have to be part of that. We are part of that. And equally, all of the debates about the shift in terms of reform of capital markets, the shift to long-termism by investors, those are our debates too. Those are what our investors in our own investor network are talking about. And whether you look at the whole inclusive capitalism movement, focusing capital for the long term, these are important international debates about how capital markets are and can change. And in that next 5 years, integrated reporting will be seen as a means, a tool by which these aims can be realised, and we will be at the heart of shaping that debate within those 5 years.
At the UN, you spoke of the idea that a lot of the short-term risks, which had caused so much damage to business, to the whole world economy, a lot of that you felt integrated reporting was a way through and a way of thinking which would bring change to that. How do we do that?
Well, there's a short-term mistake as well as a long-term success within that question. The short-term mistake is to see integrated reporting or any other form of reporting as some sort of insurance policy that can insure you against reputational damage. No one simple answer exists for that, and I can understand the motivation for that in companies, particularly those that have either been affected by corporate scandals or who are worried about them. But I am equally certain, as I said, in that my very first speech as chief executive on a public stage in the United Nations, is that if companies genuinely want to analyse risk and manage risk, not just in the short term, but for the long term, then integrated reporting is absolutely integral to being able to do that. And companies do understand risk, and they understand the cost of mismanaging risk. And therefore, when we say that integrated reporting is not an add-on, it's not something which is disclosures for disclosure's sake, but genuinely about companies building long-term value, being better managed, understanding and managing risk, and therefore reducing costs but creating value, this is a very, very strong message.
And of course, the government here in the UK, the Prime Minister has talked a lot about trying to bring about some sort of inclusive capitalism. What do you think the IIRC should be saying to the government and saying to the Prime Minister in terms of putting across what you can achieve via integrated reporting and thinking?
Well, the first thing I would say is that the movement for inclusive capitalism is not in any one country, it's a global movement, and the summit that took place earlier this autumn, this fall, was in the United States, and we had business leaders, investors, as well as governmental representatives from all around the world. And if you go on the Inclusive Capitalism website, you'll see that integrating information in their reporting is absolutely one of their four top priorities, and it really makes the case. But if you take the recent article and speeches by the Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, one of the things that we as IIRC have drawn to their attention is that in their company law, the Companies Act 2006, they stick to a backward-looking definition of shareholder primacy, and yet in their corporate governance code they are working exactly along the lines that IIRC does to say that there should be a concentration for boards and for executives on long-term value creation. Now, we've said to them, make good your words by bringing these two together, aligning them. But we say that not just in one market, one country, in the UK or Europe, we say that globally, and aligning corporate governance codes, stewardship codes to the principles of integrated reporting and long-term value creation is an important opportunity in each country and in each region of the world.
One of the ways in which you can bring this about through integrated reporting is through your corporate reporting dialogue. When I was talking to Paul in the previous interview, he talked a bit about one of the problems they'd have was trying to avoid clashes between what he described as organisational egos. The corporate reporting dialogue presumably helps with that. I mean, and also helps exactly what we've been talking about just now. What will you be doing through that dialogue, and how do you see its role expanding?
The first thing I'd say, let's not assume everyone out there understands what that is. What I hear when I talk with businesses and investors is that there is still some confusion. They feel there's too many different initiatives and frameworks and methodologies out there, and they profess to be being a bit confused by them, and then that itself acts as an obstacle for driving forward. And so what IIRC identified with our partners is actually, let's get the major frameworks together, and for the very first time to get the major financial standard setters in the world, ISB and FASB, together with the major sustainability standard setters, including the Carbon Disclosure Project, the GRI and SASB, with the whole concept of integrated reporting not being seen as just yet another framework, but being the convener, being seen as the force which is bringing these two together. And I'm very proud that we have convened and lead that work. I respect and support each of our partners in that process. And I believe that that will help us drive this whole debate forward, because people want not different questionnaires and different questions on different days. They want us to increasingly align and converge the questions that are being asked, and I believe that that dialogue can play an important role. It's not going to happen overnight, and if people have that expectation, then I have to actually play that down. But in the long term as well, I believe it is the right path to go on. And if we didn't have a dialogue bringing those networks together, I would want to be sitting here and saying I want to invent it. It is there. It's produced a landscape map. It's produced a very important common paper on the whole definition of what materiality means. Really important in this world, and they've managed to achieve it together, and I want that to build and be more successful. I'm going to be getting more resources into it to be more successful into the future.
A lot of what we're talking about originally sprang from the accountancy profession. What's your message to the accountancy profession at this point?
Well, I think the accountancy profession have been key drivers, and I pay credit for that. But why? Because they actually share the same aim that IIRC does of wanting better corporate reporting. You know, they don't want to just be part of the old compliance model. They've got an important role to play in that. But look at the big accountancy companies and many around them, and they want to ensure that their work is informing the management for good business strategy, is part of that long-term value creation story. And one of the things that I'm very clear about entering into this job is that you look at the major companies, you look at the accountancy federations, they're all doing work, have projects, organising debates around better corporate reporting. And one of my messages to them is don't leave integrated reporting over to one side. Integrate integrated reporting in those debates, and don't just talk about the ideas which are part of integrated reporting, value creation, the 6 capitals. Make it explicit that that is integrated reporting, and in doing so you can yourselves be part of the leadership and advocacy which enables integrated reporting to go forward. But they are doing that. Take Deloitte, where we're sitting. I've met David Cruikshank, the global chair, as one of my very first meetings. I think that shows how important this is for the accountancy community, and this platform has many times covered the whole issue of integrated reporting. And then look at the invitations that I've had the privilege of receiving, and we'll be meeting in the early new year, the Global Accountancy Alliance, the IASB, IFRS trustees. Each of those global boards have invited me to speak with them in this first 100 days, and I think that shows how important it is for the accountancy community internationally that we drive ahead on this goal of assuring integrated reporting.
On a personal point, given that we're talking about how integrated reporting works, how will you, after your first year as chief executive, what sort of KPIs will you measure yourself by as to what you've achieved and what you may not have achieved?
Well, in 1 year, I certainly would want the whole family, which is supports integrated reporting, to really know and understand me, and me to really know and understand them, because the organisation I'm honoured to lead is 27 people globally in staff terms, and the truth is our key advocates in terms of driving integrated reporting are not just ourselves and not just myself, but our board, our stakeholder council, these 70 very senior people drawn from business, drawn from the accountancy community, drawn from a regulatory environment. Those people are the driving force for integrated reporting. The relationships I have with them, crucially important. They will be excellent by the end of that 12 months. I believe that there will be major progress on the international debates that we've already been discussing. I believe the FSB, Financial Stability Board Task Force on Climate related disclosure is going to seize the agenda during 2017. I've already, even before I took up post, I was representing IIRC in the discussions around that. I see that to be so crucially important. And you know, I passionately believe that we must combat climate change, and businesses have an important role to do that. But I'm at the International Integrated Reporting Council because I believe that can only work if it's integrated, and that it can only work if it's integrated with other capitals, human social relationship, and other capitals, not just bringing natural and financial capital together. And therefore I want to make sure that those messages are very, very strongly heard, not just in the work of that task force, I've already been doing that, but when that then goes to get considered by the G20 governments, major governments in the world, and because I believe that this will be an extremely important opportunity for us to drive forward the whole debates about integration. I believe also in the next 12 months that we can make strides in ensuring that we are at the heart of the corporate governance debate. We've decided as IIRC that our annual conference this year will be jointly partnered with the International Corporate Governance Network, and I think that will ensure that in terms of the investment community, in terms of board members, that these debates will be much higher priority by the end of the 12 months. And by the way, I think we're at 300 people for the conference from around the world, people at the highest level that we want to be engaged with. And these are all very good signs, a hugely wonderful platform on which I can build and on which I am intent on building in that 12 months.
Yeah. One of the other things you've touched on in first pronouncements was the idea that you could also improve morality within business and how important it is to do that. Could you just expand a bit on that?
Yes, I think I've spent 20 years as the Corporate Responsibility Rapporteur saying this isn't just philanthropy, this isn't just altruism, it is about companies knowing about and understanding and then managing their impacts. And at IIRC, I will be repeating those statements and making very sure it's not just about getting it involved, mainstreaming it in the business, but it being part of successful business strategy, successful long-term value creation. That is our emphasis. But that doesn't mean that people in business or people in investment are sort of morally neutral or ambiguous. You know, I'm doing this work and have done this work over many years because actually I've learnt and been inspired and motivated by people I've met in the business community, in the investment community, who hold very strong ethics and morality. And the idea that the people who want to create a better world or a better environment are only people outside in NGOs or in amongst citizens or even amongst active shareholders, it's nonsense. Many people within businesses feel that just as strongly. And I was at, for example, the Rio Plus 20 UN Summit for Sustainable Development. No doubt there that the business leaders were ahead of the governmental representatives on what they wanted to see. And even since taking up post at IIRC, I've been at the business network meeting when we met in the United Nations Forum. This very week I'm going to be at the B20, the business network, which is part of the whole G20 debates. And in those meetings, I'm not meeting morally neutral or ambiguous people. I'm meeting people with vision, people with passion, people who are committed, who can see that they have the opportunity in their business, in their work, to be able to realise aims that many people outside of business would share, and that should be acknowledged, and I acknowledge it as part of how we're going to deliver integrated reporting.
Richard Howitt, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.